Hello, good morning. Thank you, Parker. As Parker said, my name is Jillian Jablonski, and I am with Tyonek Tribal Conservation District, and today I'll be talking about our project, Anadromous Waters and Elodea surveys in the remote western Mat-Su. So real quick before I dive into the project, though, just a quick, what is and who are Tyonek Tribal Conservation District, or as you'll hear me refer to as TTCD. We are a 6.6 million acre district. We share boundaries with the State Game Management Unit 16B. You can see a map of our district boundaries here. So the northeast section of our district is in the Mat-Su. Okay, I'll jump back to the project. So in our project, in our 2022 project, we had two objectives, and that was to identify data gaps in the Anadromous Waters Catalog, or as you'll hear me refer to that, the AWC, particularly near proposed development. And we conducted fish surveys to add to the AWC, as well as conducting presence-absence surveys for Elodea in high-risk water bodies. And we had those two joined together because we identified regions where those needs overlapped. And that really came into being because when we used to go out Elodea surveying, we used to bring minnow traps and look for fish to add to the AWC, so it made sense to do it on a slightly larger scale. So for those of you who don't yet know about Elodea, it's an aquatic invasive plant, the only known aquatic invasive plant in Alaska. It can degrade salmon habitat when it grows in dense, especially when it grows in dense monocultures, by reducing spawning habitat, altering water chemistry and stream flow. You can see from this picture here, this is from Sucker Lakes, or Sucker Lake out in the Mat-Su, and you can just see how it would impede boat travel. It can even impede fish and aquatic bird movement. So in the Mat-Su, the known locations are in Alexander and Sucker Lakes, and then in Big Lake, as I talked about yesterday. And then looking at anadromous waters, particularly in the remote western Mat-Su, there is, and there has been previously, potential development in this region, currently the West Sioux Access Road. And there's so much water out there, and presumably looking at all the water and the known anadromous waterways, there's presumably a lot of salmon, but not, a lot less than what are, a lot fewer streams than are listed than what you'd expect if you're looking. So I'm not going to dive super deep into our methods, but I wanted to talk a little bit about it. Our subregion for this summer was southwest of Alexander Lake. And for our AWC surveys, we selected sites by looking at the NHD, National Hydrography Dataset layers, and aerial imagery for likely anadromous waters. In the field, we used backpack electrofishers and minnow traps. And then we prioritize sites based on proximity to proposed development. Elodea surveys, we consulted existing data and selected lakes by lake size and floatplane use. And then we surveyed for anadromous fish at each water body that we sampled for Elodea. The quick Elodea results are that we didn't find any, so that was good. We surveyed a total of 6 water bodies. And all surveys were conducted in August and September, and we used some standard survey methods. I'm not going to dive into that, but if you'd like to hear more, please chat with me. So here's a map of our survey locations. We have 8 Mile Lake at the top, and then Keyhole down at the bottom, and then in our primary survey area, we had Jerf, Lake, Trail, and then Otter and Yensis, if you're familiar with the lakes out there. For our AWC survey results, we visited a total of 19 sites, and that includes the Elodea survey sites. We found anadromous fish at 8 sites and widespread Dolly Varden at pretty much almost all of the sites. We submitted a total of 8 nominations to the AWC this year, and all of the sampling for this occurred in August and September. So for where we had the overlap, we had 5 lakes that we surveyed for anadromous fish, which resulted in 2 nominations to the AWC. And then here's the map of our AWC survey locations. You can see Alexander Creek kind of in the, just off the center on the right. And these are all of the survey sites, except, I think 8 Mile Lake is on there too. And then zooming in on the bulk of them, you can see all the green is where we observed fish, not just salmon, but any fish species, and red where there were no fish observations. And then you can see this red circled area is where we found all of the coho salmon that we observed in this project. And then as we went further up northwest, that was kind of the land of the dollies. So if I was listening to this presentation, I'd want to see some pictures about where we surveyed. This was one of the more productive creeks we surveyed, Trail Creek, with coho salmon. And then the tributaries off of Trail Creek were amazing. This is what they looked like, and they were full of coho. And that was pretty awesome. For a different site idea, this is the outlet of Durf Lake, so that was one of our Elodea survey sites, and AWC site. So like I said, we had 8 total nominations in the region and added 23 miles to the Anadromous Waters Catalog, which was 5 new streams, and then adding species life stages or extending the known extent for the remaining 3. And conclusions, there's so much water out there. As many of you probably know, and there's all these little creeks that are running through the landscape that are nearly impossible to see or impossible to see on aerial imagery. So you really don't know that they're even there until you're on the ground, which would just indicate that there are potentially a lot more anadromous streams out there than we even really realize. There's still so many streams in that region that likely have anadromous fish, and we'll be conducting additional surveys in 2023. Oh, here's an idea of kind of why can't really see things from aerial imagery. Because it's hard enough to see things when you're on the ground, when you have 6-foot-tall grass. So our future plans are to continue surveys within this region. We have some funding for some additional surveys to conduct in 2023, and we're going to work to survey areas that were inaccessible in 2022 due to water levels, because our last survey happened at the end of September, and there was water everywhere. And then we plan on expanding to the area northwest of Alexander Lake and continuing our surveys there. And then quick thank you to the partnership and to the Alaska Freshwater Fish Inventory crew who came out in the field with us a couple of days, and then our transportation, Alpine, and Trail Ridge Air. And with that, I'll take any questions if you have any.
Thanks, Jillian. I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions.
Thanks very much. That was great. I'm curious if you guys have any plans for eDNA sampling, or if that might be something in the works.
We don't right now. At least for this next year, we'll be kind of sticking to these same methods that we did in 2022, but that is something, because we plan, or we're hoping for sampling in a few more years in the future, so that is something that we should keep in mind. Thank you.
Oh, Andy, okay.
You mentioned coho. Did you find any other salmon species in those streams?
We didn't. We found all coho in these surveys.
All right, thank you, Jillian.
Thanks.